Hey Bookaholics, and welcome back to another video. Today we are starting another reading vlog. This reading vlog is the next in my horror reading vlogs. Last year I did a series of romance vlogs where I tried different romance subgenres to see what I like in romance. And today we're doing the same with horror. Horror is a genre I know I really like, but I don't know my tastes in as well as I would like. So within horror, I know less about my specific tastes, and therefore when I read a synopsis, I'm like, that sounds good. And sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. I am much better at identifying what I like in my more comfort zone genres. For example, fantasy. So we're going to be working through some different horror subgenres to see where my vibes are at. The first one of these that I did was back in February, and I did do a romance one to transition between romance and horror. So I did romantic horror. Today's one is going to be Gothic horror, and we're going to be talking through 3 books that I am planning to read for this vlog to see how much I like modern Gothic horror. So let's get started. The first one of these is the only one that I own digitally, and that is Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This one is a Carmilla retelling. Now, I am not a fan of Carmilla, but I am a fan of the concept of Carmilla. The book was fine. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. I loved that it's sapphic classics, like heck yes, please. But I am not like cray about Carmilla as a book itself. Like the writing was fine, but I am a big fan of just her existence. So Carmilla retellings really do sound like my kind of thing, if you know what I mean. I'm excited for this one. In this one, we are following Lenore, who is in a relationship with a man. We're in the Victorian era, so we very much have a woman who has been kind of bartered into marriage, and her marriage is kind of failed at this point. Like, they are not in love with each other. They're not even, I think, fans of each other. They're not keen, but they do whisk away to the moors where a horrible accident happens, and then they also befriend a lady named Carmilla who comes to stay with them. And then she is torn between her wanting to rekindle her romance with her husband and also this burning passion that she has for Carmilla. It's sapphic, it's vampiric, it's Gothic. It sounds like it should be my thing. I'm very excited for this one. The next one that I have is Diavola. Yes, I did already mention this in my TBR, but in case you didn't see that, my copy is a little bit fooked. And that is because it got left out in the rain by my postie. Thanks a lot. However, I did get refunded for this, and they just told me to keep the copy. They're like, well, it's damaged, we don't want it. So they told me to keep the copy. And I have a Cricut iron, so I ironed out the pages as best I could, and they are completely readable. So it's an ugly ass copy now, but it does serve its purpose. So instead of spending that money again and repurchasing another book, I just kind of fixed it to the best of my abilities. This one is following a family in which we have a woman who's like really high-strung businesswoman, and she's gone on holiday with her family to Tuscany, I think. Yeah, Tuscan countryside somewhere, where they've rented out a villa and they're all gonna like hang out for a few weeks in the summer. I think things start to go badly. It's got Haunting of Hill House and Exorcist vibes apparently. So we've got Gothic but modern. I really like the idea of this one because our like super high-strung businesswoman is the black sheep in her family who are all really laid back. Normally you have like this like in romances you have this high-strung family, they're all lawyers and doctors and they've all got like these fancy professions, and then you have the girl who's like an artist and they're all like, get a real job. And with this one, they're all like, you need to chill. And I really like having that dynamic inverted, and I'm very curious to see how that's going to fare, because I suspect that it's also going to show, is she carrying the family? Potentially. Anyway, I'm very excited to get into this one. I think that it's going to show a really interesting family dynamic on the back of this horror. I don't know exactly where the Gothic comes in yet. I'm guessing that's the Haunting of Hill House vibe that we've got. So long as the prose style or the atmosphere match up with Gothic, I'm fine with it. I think it needs to have at least one of the two for it to be considered Gothic, in my opinion. And then the last one that we have is My Darling Dreadful Thing by Joanne Van Veen. This one I am very curious about. This one is another sapphic one because we're here for the sapphics, okay? This one is following a young woman named Rose Berkman who does backroom seances, and she can see the corpse. Like she can see like a corpse in her head named Ruth, and therefore she's kind of deemed a little bit unreliable narrator, I suspect. Then this woman, this wealthy widow named Agnes, comes to one of her seances. The two strike up a friendship that then turns to attraction, and then a murder happens. We are seeing as Ruse is the one that is blamed for the murder, and she's going to have to prove her innocence, but she's deemed hysterical, like she has hysteria, the good old Victorian hysteria. So both her sanity and her innocence are called into question, and she's going to have to prove both. I am very excited to get to this and to see how it's going to fare. I do have questions sometimes about when women's insanity is depicted. I do think that sometimes it can do more harm than good. I have a couple of examples for that, but I don't want to spoil books for you. So, but I've heard fantastic things about Joanna Van Veen, and it's sapphic, so I couldn't pass up the opportunity to read a sapphic Gothic novel. So we have 3 books to get through. Hopefully, I'm going to love them. Hopefully, I'm going to get very invested in all of them. And this is the genre, the subgenre I'm most excited for out of all of the ones that I have planned for the year. So a lot is riding on this genre as to whether or not it is something that I like the aesthetics of, like if I like it more in theory than in execution, or if it's something I can really vibe with. Because I know I like it in classics, both in a non-fantastical form like the Brontes, or in a fantastical form like Dorian Gray. So I know I like it in classics, so we'll see how I fare with it in a contemporary voice, if not setting. But I'm very excited to get into these. So let's go do that. I think I will probably start with both Hungerstone and Diavola, because one I have digitally and one I have physically. I do like having a physical book on the go pretty much at all times. I'm not a big fan of only reading digitally unless I absolutely have to. So I think I will try and do both. But if the vibes merge a little tiny bit too much, then I'll stop one. But I think I'm going to do the 2, because this one being a contemporary setting in Tuscany and the other one being like a Victorian setting in England, I feel like the vibes, even if tonally they are similar or whatever, I feel like they will be different enough that I should be able to get away with it. So wish me luck, and I will check back in once I have some thoughts. Hey vlog, I'm here to check in because I am now a third of the way into Diavola. I'm not gonna lie, I keep thinking of pizza every time I see the title of this book, but I am really liking it so far. It's not very Gothic and prose style. I think it's going to be more Gothic in vibes. At the moment, just a couple of creepy things have started to eke their way into this family's holiday. Also, I love how like functionally dysfunctional this family is. Apart from the older sister who's like strung too tight, no one is too toxic, but they're just toxic enough that it leads to family drama. I do find the older sister and the mum a little bit much, I'm not gonna lie, but in a way that is still very human. It's not like OTT melodramatic. So far I'm enjoying it. I really don't want to be around the family. There are a lot, but it's fun to read and I'm excited to continue. So I thought I'd just check in, give some brief thoughts. I'm going to go switch to Hungerstone now. So once I've read a bit of that, I will let you know how I'm faring. All right, vlog, long-ish update incoming, because I have read a bit more of Diavola and I am now halfway into Hungerstone. So let's get going. Since I last talked about Diavola, we'll switch to Hungerstone first. I am really loving the prose style in this. I think that it's captured the Gothic essence without feeling pretentious. I feel like a lot of the time when people write like a modern Gothic, it tends to then feel a bit pretentious, like you're trying too hard to sound Gothic, because obviously back in the day, that was just how people, it's like reading a modern atmospheric book as opposed to like a historical one, right? Is how it would have read back in the day. And a lot of the issues that I have with modern Gothics is that they're trying to emulate a prose style of the Victorians without using Victorian language, because that would feel ridiculous. So trying to use modern language and squeeze it into a Victorian grammatical structure, and I don't think it works very well. But this one, it's sticking to a modern storytelling style, modern grammar, modern inflection, modern pacing of the sentences, but is doing so with the level of atmosphere that you would expect from Victorian Gothics. And I think it does a better job with that. I'm not gonna lie, I actually think that works better. This feels more Gothic for it. So I really appreciate that. I'm really enjoying that element. I really like Lenore as a character as well. She is the relationship in here is a fantastic example of the kind of abusive marriage that you would expect from Victorian times that would have been completely normalized. He's not hitting her. He's not threatening her life. It's just a lot of, be quiet, know your place, don't do what I don't want you to do. It's a lot of like controlling her, dismissing her, and belittling her. And it's never so overt that back in the day it would have been considered abuse. He would have been considered a perfectly normal husband back in Victorian times. And I love the way that that's depicted. I love the way that we're depicting Lenore as well. She's a lot of the time when we read modern books about Victorian women, they tend to be modern women in Victorian clothing. They tend to have very modern views and a way about them that's very modern. Lenore feels like a Victorian woman. She has a lot of the mindsets of a Victorian woman. A lot of, like, it's not fair, but that's my lot. A lot of, I've got shit to do, I shouldn't have to do this. A lot of, even if she opposes social conventions, she is not going to outwardly defy them. Just kind of, deep breath and put up with it. And it's showing such a good balance of her strength of character along with the way she's been socialized. So the things that she's been taught to think and feel, the way she's been trained versus who she is inside. And both of those are coming through in equal measure. And I just think that's really good. Camilla is suitably creepy. And one of the things I really like about Camilla as well is that she is the one that is there to tell her social conventions suck. While she's kind of creepy and therefore it's easy for Lenore to be like, okay, this woman's a bit not okay, and therefore dismiss what she's saying. You have a lot of Camilla being like, stop listening to what you've been taught, at the same time as being like someone who is a bit unnerving. And that combo is so good as well. Henry's such a prick and it's done so well as well. And the way that we're like given information slowly, it doesn't feel to be deliberately eked out. It doesn't feel like, okay, we've mentioned this 19 times, I'm so bored, can you just tell me? It's done subtly enough, like enough, prevalent enough that it's a thing you need to know, but subtly enough that it's not eye-rolly and annoying and being like, just tell me. So that, again, fantastic combo. So I'm having a really good time so far with this one. It's going to be difficult, I think, to talk about the second half without spoiling things, but we'll see how I manage to fare with talking about it. But very creepy, very atmospheric. I very much enjoy. Then I have also read another third of Diavola, so I am now on page 215. So again, quite a decent ways in. This second third is where all the creepiness has started to amp up. You kind of get the vibe that, so the townspeople kind of know not to trust this house they're staying in, and you're starting to get a vibe a little bit about the townspeople as well. Not in like a House of Wax kind of way, but just in there's something there as well, like they know more than they're laying on kind of vibe as well. And yeah, a lot of the creepy has really started to set in when it comes to who or what, I suppose, is haunting them, etc. But also, equally importantly, the familial relationships, the family dynamics that are happening in here are so well done because they're so infuriating. Like, there isn't a single person apart from Anna at this point I don't want to throttle. It's done well, and they're done for different reasons. So for example, there's a character in here that is actually generally quite laid back and relatively supportive of Anna. Because of his role in his family, there are times I want to throttle him on behalf of his wife, even though I want to throttle his wife because she's an asshole. So it's so interesting to me that it's just like everyone in here is more than a little bit toxic. And I'm really enjoying that dynamic. So the creepy is happening, but also the way the family dynamic is happening is also very engaging. So I'm loving that combo. Very different vibes. This one is much more like aesthetically Gothic, and this more is creepy element of Gothic. Like, this has got the creepy factor, this has got the prose factor. So two opposite ends of what I want out of a Gothic. So I'm having a great time, and we shall continue. So once I've finished both of these now, I guess, I don't think I'm going to have enough more to say about these because this is a spoiler-free vlog. So I will get back to you when I've finished these, and we'll see what my final verdict is. All right, vlog, I have now finished both Diavola and also Hungerstone, so I thought I would check in with some thoughts. First off, Diavola, I ended up giving this 4 stars. I had a really good time with it. It got very creepy, and I liked the way the ending of this one went. There's a lot of female rage going on in here, which I always appreciate. It's an interesting one because every single person in this book is toxic. Like, there isn't a single person in here that is not really, really toxic. And the way that the book went about it, I just really appreciated. I also really appreciated the way our protagonist went about confronting all of the issues that she has. And also the way that some of these problems occurring were quite liberating for her in other issues. I had a good time with it. When we have a book that is discussing this kind of female rage, when we're discussing familial issues and the way that then people react and respond to those things, the way that so many members of this family were all so selfish. Like, every single person is really selfish in this book. And I really appreciated the way that this book was discussed, because taking the time to highlight the way that our protagonist's trauma is happening without solely pigeonholing her into a victim mentality. It's not one of those that is just forcing you to like the protagonist and therefore hate everyone else around them. You like the protagonist, you hate everyone else around them, but it's taking the time to show that there is toxicity within our protagonist as well. That everyone's a messy person, not our protagonist is some poor innocent baby and everyone else is horrible to her. And I really like that it took the time to do that. So 4 stars, had a great time. I will definitely read something else by this author. Actually, I need to look up to see if this author has written anything else. I will do that later. Then we also have Hungerstone, which I have just finished. This one is set during the Victorian era. I know that because she talks about her aunt wearing all black just like the Queen. That's gotta be Vicky. Right? It's gotta be. Definitely in the Victorian era. I knew it was the 1800s. I didn't know exactly when. And I also knew that it was later 1800s because we're talking about trains and things. So yeah. Victorians. Really appreciated a lot of the things going on in here because this is another one that is female rage. And in this one's case, we have Carmilla, who is not really, she's not a vampire in the traditional sense of a vampire in here. We're following a young woman who is in this abusive relationship, and because it's by Victorian standards, not an abusive relationship because it's not overt in its abuse. He's not hitting her. He's not causing her physical harm. And therefore, she has nothing to complain about. His neglect, his mistreatment, the way he talks to her, the way that she feels constantly threatened by him, the way she needs to put herself down and make herself small and meek, the way she has to apologize for his actions, the way that his temper can always flare and it's seen as normal. But if she even suggests something that makes him uncomfortable, then she's the one in the wrong. All of those things. I've really, really appreciated that kind of depiction that abuse isn't just you hit your partner. And I appreciated that. I also really love the way that we have this woman being unleashed, this woman being unraveled, but to make herself whole again. And I really loved the way that Camilla played into that. I also love the way that Cora, who is a friend of our protagonist, who has come to stay at their new home because they've gone to the countryside to set up their new estate, which is in a state of disrepair, and she doesn't have much time to get it ready for hosting like a big hunting shooting party because her husband is new money and he is constantly trying to prove himself, and he needs her because she's the one that knows how to do it properly because she is actually from the upper classes as opposed to new money. That's why he married her, because she had no money, she didn't have dowry, he had money and then she had the status, so he thought the combo would work well, which was a common thing that happened a lot during the Victorian era. So yeah, I really appreciated the way that it showed her coming into her own and the way that Carmilla guided her, and the way that we saw the way that women treat each other during this time period versus the way that they should maybe think of each other. I think there were some really important conversations had in here regarding the patriarchy, regarding the way that women police themselves into the patriarchy, and if it were so natural, we would not have to constantly remind ourselves and force ourselves and need external reminders. So I really appreciated a lot of the conversations and a lot of the feminist rage that happens in here. So 2 feminine rage books done. On to the next one. So the next target is of course going to be My Darling Dreadful Thing by Joanna Van Veen, the last one for this vlog. I believe that this one is also going to be sapphic. I don't know if it's going to be feminist, but I think so because we are talking about hysteria, and normally when women write about hysteria it is to mock the fact that men treat everything as hysteria so that they can control women. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this one. This one is in parts, so I think I'll just do an update per part and then we will be done. So once I've finished part 1, I'll come check back in, give you some thoughts. Good morning vlog. I am here to check in because I have now finished part 1 of My Darling Dreadful Thing. We've met our protagonist Ruth, we've met her spirit companion Ruth, and we have now met another very pivotal character in the story who is Agnes. Ruth has been raised by her mother, who is very, very cruel and is a fake, I guess, seancer. She pretends that she can commune with the dead through Ruth. She abuses Ruth and she forces Ruth into these cons. So Ruth gets then possessed by Ruth, who is very protective of Ruth. Like, she's not like an evil poltergeist, she's a very protective figure, and she kind of takes over so that then Ruth doesn't have to feel like the shame and the guilt that she feels whenever she has to pretend to be possessed by someone's loved one. And then Ruth, who is an adult and is a lot more confident and has a lot more ability to pretend to do these things. It was a very interesting story actually to it to begin with when we're seeing her with her mother, because the mother is the typical kind of narcissist mother where she pretends that she cares about Ruth only in front of all these other people so that she can exact more money from them. Oh, look at the toll it's taking on her body. But then she's actually really abusive. She's starving Ruth as well because she wants Ruth to continue to look young. So Ruth is 21 but apparently easily passes for a teenager because she starves her. Thankfully, at the beginning of this book, there are content warnings because Ruth is also somewhat sexualized, both as a child and then as an adult looking like a child. And her mother leans into that because she thinks it will get her more money. So that's also like some trauma that Ruth is carrying with her. Now, this is told in somewhat two timelines. We have where Ruth is telling the story of from when she's young, when she first meets Ruth, all the way through to the events of the story, which are that there has been a murder. We are also following, every now and then in between chapters, we get interviews that she is having with a doctor who is analysing whether or not she is insane and therefore whether or not she can stand trial. So we are following her as she is being accused of murder. The doctor is fascinating to read as well because the doctor is your tip. I think this is 1950s as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I think it's at least the events of the story 1953, I think, or at least when she first meets Agnes, it's definitely 1953. I don't know how long in between then and the interview. But the doctor is fascinating because he is your typical historic male doctor. And the thing is, what's fascinating is that the author's done such a good job because he is trying genuinely to be compassionate. In his notes, he's like, I'm trying to gain her trust because I want to genuinely be able to understand this woman. But at the same time, then he says things like, oh, it could be homosexuality, a known disorder of the mind. So obviously, at the time, it was known as a disorder. So again, check your content warnings. But it's fascinating because you have someone who is like, the weaker sex and women and, they're more susceptible, blah, 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 more susceptible to trauma, homosexuality, that's a disorder. And at the same time, someone who is seemingly trying to be compassionate. And that's why I always find it fascinating. Whenever we read historical books, I always find it fascinating when we have characters that are like that. Characters who do not pass the vibe check, especially by modern standards. They do not pass the vibe check. I do not like homophobic, misogynistic men. Who'd have thunk it as a bi woman? But at the same time, that is one of the times where thinking, oh, he is a product of his time works and doesn't, because there were men who didn't hate women and didn't hate queers back in this man's day, and he's a doctor. I think also, though, a little bit of what I'm finding fascinating is that I think most women, let's be honest, but at least a decent chunk of women, if not, have had some kind of medical issue and have been subjected to medical misogyny. Every girls group chat that I have, we hate going to the doctor. We're always afraid of going to the doctor because of the way that we might get talked to or the fact that we might not get believed, right? That is definitely something that happens to me. So hearing this doctor, again, his inner thoughts, and any time that he puts anything down to, well, he hasn't really put anything quite down to her sex, but whenever he tries to make these weird leaps, of oh, is this sexual in nature, for example, and she's like, that's fucking weird. If it weren't intrusive for doctors to do that now, they still would. You go for a checkup on your period and they'd just ask you about your sex life because they could. I guess her interviews with the doctor are kind of affecting me a little bit because I've not had the best time with doctors, especially male doctors. Actually, no, to be fair, my worst one was a female doctor. Him being really dismissive of her, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I necessarily, if someone came up to me and I interviewed them and we were going to be talking about whether or not ghosts are real, to the point of it justifying a murder, I'm not sure I necessarily believe in ghosts enough to believe that. But his line of questioning always kind of gets me. And I think that combo is really good as well. I'm really appreciating a lot of the discussions that are being had in here when it comes to feminism, when it comes to women, when it comes to medical and psychological analysis of women during this time period. And then also the way that we explain spirits. So Ruth has a spirit, which is Ruth, who she found under the floorboards. She believed was conjured up by her fear, by a moment where she had her greatest fear, as she was very alone at the time. Now, what's interesting is that she's saying most of the spirits that she has seen that are real tend to come from bodies that don't decompose. So things like bog bodies, right? Or any of the ones that have naturally mummified. I find that really fascinating because the way they initially present themselves versus the way way that they can kind of like transform into looking more humane as time goes on. So that's really cool. There are some really gross moments in there as well, because Ruth really likes absorbing Rose's blood. So there was a bit where there was like a shard of lollipop stuck in her gum that was making it bleed, and Ruth at the time had possessed her, so she was just kind of letting that happen. Or when Rose Menzies finally came and she cleaned herself, you know, like there are times where I'm like, oh, nope, that's not for me. It adds to the creepiness, I guess. Anyway, into Agnes, who is also fascinating. So Agnes is the character that comes later on in the book. She is mentioned on the back, and that's why I will mention her. She's a character that came in about, I'd say, the last third of part 1. And she is a rich widow who came to one of the seances that Rose's mum held. Didn't believe it, but she could see Ruth. She's the first person who could see Ruth. She comes and she pays Rose's mother to be able to take Rose away. She knows that Rose is being abused. And she comes to take her away and have her as a companion. And we've kind of seen it where they've just like started to form a bond. And I think that it's going to be a really interesting one. I really, really liked the beginning of that and the way that felt, because it feels really intense. And any of those relationships in a horror that starts like really, really intense, even if positively intense, it's going to go a certain way, isn't it? Let's be honest. So I'm very curious to see if this is going to become the kind of toxic that is going to be a breaking point, or if it's going to have this kind of closeness that is so inseparable no one else in the world could possibly understand. You know, it's going to be one or the other, and I'm really excited to see how it's going to form. I'm going to go on and read part 2. This is a really long update, but I had a lot to say on this book. This is my favorite one, I think, so far, and that's saying something, because this has been a really good vlog. But yeah, I'm going to go read part 2, which doesn't seem to be very long. It will take me to page 217, and I will check back in once I am done with that. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to say at that point, so it might be a substantially shorter update, but yeah, let's see how I go. Vlog, the unraveling is happening. We're in the very beginnings of it. We're just starting to see those cracks begin to happen, those choices that can't be undone, those assumptions, those questions, those interactions, and I am here for it. I'm not going to be able to talk very long about this, as I expected, which is fun because the last update was fucking long. So here we are with part 2 of My Darling Dreadful Thing. When I tell you that the way the characters in here are all, every single one of them, just slightly off, where you're like convinced of their good intentions, almost. You're convinced that people are making the right choices, that everyone is doing the right thing, that everyone is what they say they are. Everyone is seeing the things they're seeing, believing the things they're believing. And it's fascinating to watch. Obviously, I can't talk about the specifics because spoilers. Just seeing those things begin to become just slightly unsettling, just slightly off, just some choices that you know are not going to go well. And I am desperate to read the final third. These are books I really want to talk about. They are ones that I am just desperate to talk to someone about, because they are ones that I have so many thoughts on. This is my kind of horror. All 3 of these books are my kind of horror, where they make you think and they make you want to have discussions. These are great book club picks, for example. And this is what I'm looking for in my horror. And I am hoping that this one continues that way. I am really looking forward to seeing how the very last part of this pulls all of those things together. What we do get and don't get as a revelation. What questions we are left with and which ones are answered. I doubt she'll be able to answer them all, unless it's one of those where it's like one answer answers everything. The way that we are leading this story, the way that it is slowly edging towards the train wreck you know is going to happen, is fabulous, and I cannot wait to get to the next part. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave this update really sweet and short, and then we'll see if I'm screaming or crying or angry at the ending, or if I just hate the author. We'll see how it goes. All right, vlog. I have done it. I have finished My Darling Dreadful Thing. Obviously, this is the most intense part of the 3 parts, and I told you that in the last part we were starting to really amp up that tension, and I could see where things were going to start, where the drama was going to start coming in. I stand by that. I think that was quite, I suppose, prevalent in the book, and I think it was handled really, really well. I was really impressed with the way the escalation in this book happened. I think that it did a really good job of making those characters behave in a way that wasn't necessarily always predictable. There are some taboo things in here. Again, I would recommend checking content warnings. I know there's there's content warnings on the first page. There is one of the content warnings that isn't on here because it would be a spoiler. You might want to do some Googling as well, potentially. I think that this was really well handled though. I really love the feminism in it. I love the queerness. Now, we do tackle things like homophobia and racism. Love interest Agnes is half Indonesian. So we do have racism in here. And then we do also have homophobia depicted because we are dealing with the Sapphic couple in the 1950s. We also have misogyny, especially medical misogyny when it comes to the idea of like hysteria and stuff. I love the character of the Doctor. I really, really do. Because on the one hand, you want to shake him because you're seeing what our protagonist is seeing. So you are like, why do you not believe her? While at the same time, there is no way a sane person would actually believe her in the real world, especially for a doctor. So I really did appreciate that. I really did like that. I love the way that the kind of criminal like case part of the story went. I thought that was handled magnificently. The way that the spirits were in here as well, the way the romance is in here. The thing is, the last horror vlog that I did, the first one I did, the most recent one, is horror romance, and none of those felt quite like a horror romance. Enter this one. This is a horror romance. This is exactly what would come to mind if I was like, what's a horror romance? This is a horror romance, and I am here for it. I'm really glad that I've been reading all of these books. I've had such a good time with them. I'm loving the amount of sapphics that we've been having in Gothic literature, because let's be honest, the level of melodrama that you have in Gothics is for the queers. You know, it's here for the queers. I'm just saying, it's our genre. And I love seeing them crop up. I've been having a wonderful time. This vlog has been amazing. And I'm sad that it's over, but it is now time to wrap up this vlog. So the first one I finished was Diavola by Jennifer Thorne. This one was fantastic. 4 stars. Loved how toxic everyone was. Really enjoyed the commentary in here about the way that families treat each other and familial trauma. Also, I suppose the way that tied into the horror elements as well. I really liked that we were kind of dealing with other people's selfishness being imposed on someone on multiple levels, and I really liked that. Then we have Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. I really did enjoy this one as well. I had a great time with it. 4 stars. I think they're both 4.5 on Core Pile. This one, I really loved the sapphic nature of it. I loved the way we had this Victorian setting. It was done so well. I love like when people do a proper good Victorian setting. This is what I want. And I think that it did a really good job of tackling, deconstructing internalized misogyny and the way that women are socialized to uphold the patriarchy, as well as also just tackling women releasing themselves of the shackles of society. I think it did it beautifully. Loved it. And then finally we have My Darling Dreadful Thing by Joanna Van Veen, which is also 4.5. So 4.5 across the board for this vlog, which is top tier. I had a brilliant time with this book. I would highly recommend. I think this potentially edges out as my favorite, but they're all such a different vibe. I'm not sure. It might just be recency bias with this one. I'm not going to lie, because they've all been magnificent. I really love the depictions about mental health, about female camaraderie, about coming into your own, about learning your own strength, and about the lengths that we will go to for those that we love. Fantastic books all round. If you're looking for some horror books and you're looking for some gothics that feel like horror, that are gothic, like the combo of the two, all of these. Definitely all of these. That is my little wrap up for this vlog. I had a fantastic time, as you can tell. So the next vlog should be coming in June, which will probably be my last vlog that I film in Spain, which is anxiety inducing, something I didn't need to think of right now. So we're not going to. I'm going to move on. Let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them. Let me know if, based on my liking of these or just my general liking of gothic horror, if you have any other recommendations for me, I would love to know. That's all for me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon.